All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the RamblinFly. My name's Adam. We also have with us Brent, our other usual host, but we do have a guest today, Jake. So wanted to pass it off over to Jake and let him tell us a little bit about himself. And we have a pretty interesting episode for you today. We asked our viewers on Instagram to give us 3 topics that we're going to do a pretty deep dive into today. So just 3 pretty general topics to keep us on track. And then we're going to kind of break them down. There's a lot of kind of nitty gritty things that I think we can get into about this, about these 3 topics. So anyways, Jake, thanks so much for joining us to be with us today. You want to tell the folks kind of who you are, a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name's Zirkle. I'm originally from Alaska. Spent most of my childhood and adult life up there, about 27, 28 years. I moved down to Washington, Oregon area, down in Ridgefield. I now currently work for a rep group with Brent, Dawn Coffee Company. We represent GLoomis and a bunch of other brands, and so I'm very familiar in the fishing and the hunting line due to my background with guiding in Alaska. So in Alaska, I spent 15 to 16 years guiding, about 13, 14 of it on my own. I ran a company up there called Alaska Flywater Guides. I did fly out stuff, helicopter stuff, float trips, 70-something mile float trips with rafts.
That sounds awful.
Power sledge, jet boats. Yeah, it was a good time. I wish I still kind of did it a little bit. But then I moved down to the Kenai Peninsula with all the traffic and the hustle and bustle, and got to stay there. But it was a great experience there too because it was close to family. So
Cool.
When I needed to get home, I could get home. So
Nice.
That's basically my background
Okay.
in a nutshell.
So you fished before then?
Oh yeah, just a little.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
And so where can I purchase the Dawn Coffee from the Dawn Coffee Company?
It's coming out next week.
Okay.
We had to smuggle it in from Mexico.
Perfect.
Working its way up to
One of
the
those
border.
Tim Cook things, you just missed the phone call.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Classic.
All
Well,
right.
Jake, thanks so
Well,
much for joining us, man. Obviously, sounds
Thank
like
you,
you've
guys.
got some expertise on these 3 topics we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, it'd be fun to go into these.
Yeah. So the 3 topics today are: what is the best boat, whether it's a jet boat, a drift boat, a skiff, a canoe, a kayak? What's the best fishing boat? Number 2 would be, are streamers really flies, or are they just fancy lures? And number 3 is, where do fish actually sit throughout the year? Lots of people fish the same areas in the river 365, 24/7. So we'll break that down a little bit, and I'm sure we'll all have the same exact opinion, and nothing will be different. Starting off with the boats, I remember, Jake, you were telling me stories about the Kenai, and you guys were running jets, I believe, and you'd be sitting in an eddy with 50 other boats. One of your clients would hook a fish, and it'd run out into the middle, get tangled in everyone's lines. They'd have to jump onto other people's boats, running across boats,
Oh.
trying the rodeo show.
Yeah.
Do you want to start with maybe 1 or 2 best boats and a little bit of that perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on where the guy's at as far as, in the U.S., but and then the dollar amount. I mean, I love a sled. I have a sled, for most guys, that's something with a power drive on it. So my boat of choice right now is a 21-foot boat for out here in the Northwest in Alaska. I just upgraded it to a big motor, so it's got a 200 pump on it. That boat's, I've had it since '06. It's my baby. But if I had to single down to one boat, there's a new boat for me that I think most guys can afford, and it can get you anywhere you want, from flyouts to drive up in the van like Brent, drop in, throwing it off bridges, sneaking in little sneaky spots, is that Outcast Striker. I own a couple of them, and that boat is 100 pounds, dripping wet. You can throw it in the back of a truck, throw it in a van, pack it down, put it on an airplane, fly to Alaska, fly to BC, go out east and jump in a plane. And so for me, for the everyday consumer, I think that would be way up on the list because I can do a lot of things with it, and it's cheap, relatively cheap.
For sure. For a boat, it certainly
nowadays.
is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a frameless 12-footer?
10 foot, or it's like 9'9" or 9'8".
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
just, let's say 10 foot.
It's a
But
it's a 2-person boat, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have two because I'll run. I have 2 kids and my wife and 2 dogs, and so we could put a dog. I've modified mine a little bit, which we can get into if we want to. And we'll have like 1 kid on front, I'll row, and a dog, and my wife will row and have a kid and a dog, and it works out phenomenal.
Awesome.
So like I said, if I was gonna have to pick it down to one and get rid of the drift boat, get rid of the bigger rafts, get rid of the jet boat, that's the one boat I have to have because I can do a lot of things with it.
So guys, if you are watching this on YouTube, obviously you see that we have the some pictures of the boats up here. If you are listening to this on a podcast, either Spotify or Apple, if Tim Cook ever can, if Brent is ever able to take Tim Cook's call to get this on on the Apple podcast, if you do hop over on the YouTube channel, you'll be able to see pictures of these boats that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Sorry, small aside there.
Yep. Jake, what have you done to modify those strikers?
So I kind of get geeked out on things when I get into something, right? Like a lot of us. So I start digging. And the way they have it set up is you have a cross beam up front that has a removable seat, and then a swivel chair type, typical folding chair up front, and then the captain's chair. Well, I had heard through the grapevine, and I wish I knew who told me, but I like I said, I dig deep. And someone said you could flip that frame and put a cooler on it. There's no photos of it, no video on YouTube. And again, I go down the YouTube wormhole a lot. Couldn't find anything. Asked Outcast, they're like, nope, you can't do it. We just put a cooler on the floor. Well, being in my background, I don't want any weight on. I don't want any weight on the floor because if I go in skinny water, I could potentially rip, the bottom floor. So I want all that weight off. So as soon as I got it, I literally ran out to the garage, met the freight guy, pulled it apart, had my 8-year-old at the time blowing it up. We flipped that frame over and put a 35 cooler. So you could put an Engel cooler, you could put a Yeti, whatever, 35 cooler fits perfectly, 2 Y straps on it. Now I got someone sitting up front, elevated at the same height, maybe a couple inches higher. And I got a place to put drinks, food, and stuff for a day trip. You could also, if you want to keep it lighter, keep it the way it was and just throw a soft cooler. But for me, that's the fishiest thing. Everything's nice and tidy. I can bounce off of things in some tight spot. We've thrown it off a bridge out on the Olympic Peninsula with the cooler attached, stayed on there. I drive around with it on a trailer or in the back of the truck. Like it's pretty sweet. I mean, at some point we probably should, I got photos we could post here, but we should do some little YouTube cut of it because I have a lot of people ask when they see it. But once I did that, that was a selling point. So a second boat came right after that.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Nice.
Yeah.
That sounds like the perfect setup.
Yeah, but I'm curious, like if you need that small of a boat, a 9-foot boat, are you fishing from the boat or are you pulling over and swinging runs or all of the above?
No, all of the above. So in we're talking for me, if I go and buy a 13 to 18 or 14 foot Sotar, Moravia airboat for my family, it wouldn't work, right? There's not enough room for 2 dogs, 2 kids, and I got great boat dogs, but it's too much of a cluster. So I'm not fishing whitewater a lot of times anymore with the family. So for me, this works. And yeah, it's got a brace, a lean brace, which you can pump up and make as hard as you want. It's a air type one. It's not a hard rigid frame. So leaning on it all day is the caster, which typically isn't me, but I've done it a little bit. It's super comfortable. If a guy, I'm not the biggest guy, but if a guy was, let's say 240, 250, I could just put a couple more pumps in it and make it a little bit more rigid and he can lean on it. I can sit on it. So if I'm turned around and we're rowing out, I could have a guy sit on there. So he's scouting for me out the back. Like it's a pretty sweet little boat. It just doesn't get enough buzz. And it's only been out maybe 3 years maybe. So I just think it's one of those things that's not on the radar. But like I said, if you ask me which boat I own, which one I could get rid of, that's probably one that's not going away. It's just I could do too much with it. From fishing from it, from swinging out of it, everything I need. I like doing float trips. Once my kids get a little older, I'll be back in airplanes, and that boat will fit right in, no problem, and still do class 3 water if I wanted to.
Now, do you have
self-bailing.
now do you have an anchor system like the NRS or whatever that boat has that same anchor system?
Yeah, so they got these little pods you put in and before you pump it up, and then you can attach Scotties to it.
Okay.
So I believe I'm running like a 20-pound anchor, 25-pound anchor, because some of the stuff out here is moving pretty quick, so I want to stop.
Sure.
Most, gradual trout streams, you could probably get away with like a 10-pound anchor. But yeah, I have an anchor system. It's got rod. I got actually a double Floby or Scotty rod holder at the side that holds double fly rods, so they're pointing off the back. You can put a net in the backside. I have put the lab will sit right behind me, my older lab. I can have them at my feet. I can kick off, there's no foot push, but you can push off the cooler the way I have it set up.
Sure.
So if you do get in a tricky spot or some rocks or some white water or something that you need to actually get a little bit more power, but at 9.5 to 10 feet, it doesn't take much to get that thing moving, right? It's a little Ferrari. So that's why I like it for my wife too, because she doesn't have as much experience as the three of us, So I feel safer when she's taking off downriver with that.
Sure.
So that'd be my choice. What's yours, Brent?
I see the use for a raft, and I get it. I live in Colorado, and a lot of our rivers aren't like mega class 4 rapids or anything that's too gnarly, but they're pretty rocky and you hit rocks. But man, I just love fishing out of a drift boat so much more than a raft. You have your little bit more of a workstation. You can make it more permanent, I think. And I think I would choose a Boulder Boat Works high side drift boat. And the reason I would choose Boulder is because you can ram it into rocks pretty darn hard, and it doesn't seem to care too much. And it slides over when you get shallow in the riffles. It slides pretty good. It doesn't stick and hang up. But the main reason I would choose the drift boat over a raft is just you have more control of your office. Like you can set your boat bag down next to your feet, the cooler on the other side. There's already a hard mounted cooler in the back as well. But when you get I fish with a lot of fishing guides and pretty experienced guys, and they want to bring their whole boat bag full of streamer boxes, nymph boxes, the whole nine. And I think it's just a little easier to keep the boat organized and not have people stepping on rods or spilling stuff into the water. So to me, that's the closest you can get to like a low water bounce off rocks type of deal, and still have your neat organized office where you got clean rod storage. Everyone's got comfy lean bars. And then they row really easy too. It tracks pretty darn straight. You start to pull on the oars, it'll shoot right across the river.
What underbelly do they have on them? Is it,
It's I believe it's a rotomolded plastic, just kind of like a Engel or a Yeti
on
cooler.
the belly.
Yep. And I believe you can also, when you beat it up enough, you can take the bottom off and put a fresh one on. I think it's quite a project, but you can replace the bottom of them.
I think you can pour if you just get like a single little issue spot. Pretty sure they make little kits that you can like melt plastic down into the like bangs and the different dents and scrapes on the bottom of it. Is that right, Brent? They have something along those lines, right?
Yeah, I would imagine so. I mean, the boat I'm using, it's been used pretty hard, and there's still no need for that yet. So I haven't had to cross that bridge yet.
That's pretty good.
And for where you're at, you'd still use the high side?
Yeah, there's enough bigger wave trains that, I've even grabbed some water over the sides if you don't hit the rollers straight enough with the high side. So I'd prefer it. And it does get blown around a little bit in the wind, but I don't know. Most of the time there's high enough river banks that the wind's not killing you too bad, or you can tuck into one side and get out of the wind.
Sweet.
That's a good choice.
Have you guys done much drift boat stuff?
Have you
owned one?
I've spent a lot of days in a drift boat. I've rode drift boats. I was this close to probably really kind of buying a drift boat at a point, and then I ended up with a raft instead. I think the drift boat's awesome if you have boat ramps on your rivers, which it may be even not that. I mean, of some of the rivers I know, Brent, you fished, or like how many rivers do you have to take the boat off the trailer before you can get it in the water? Like,
there's a few. Like, there's one section in particular. I'm not going to call it out, but a drift boat wouldn't work. Like, you got to dump it down a 100-foot rock,
like a slide,
and drag it. Yeah,
and that's how it is out west too, out where we're at. Almost all of them on the coast are like that.
Yeah.
So
a drift boat doesn't make a ton of sense out there.
What about with your drift boat? Do you ever do any launches that you back the trailer up to as close to the water as you can? You have to get the boat off by hand, and then you drag it or slide it or whatever. Are there any that you do with your drift boat that aren't boat ramps?
Haven't done it with the drift boat yet. I've been lucky enough to have friends with rafts when we do those particular sections. But I think it could be done. You'd have to get a little creative with some PVC rollers or something,
right,
and roll it down. But like, that boat is pretty darn tough. You could drag it and not really worry about hurting it. So
is that something you think you could do by yourself if you were guiding? Or do you think it would be a 2 to 3 man crew to get that boat in the water?
It's a good question.
Or I guess, should I say, are those floats? I mean, I guess maybe, for the folks listening, maybe they don't have friends with boats. Maybe they're the friend that is looking to buy a boat. Is it worth buying a drift boat and then not fishing those specific spots?
I guess that depends on where you are. Like, there's enough floatable water near me that has improved boat ramps, or, good enough boat ramps that with a 4-wheel drive you can get the boat in, that I don't feel the need to have to like sacrifice for a raft. There's plenty of fishable water, and then if for some reason I have to fish those other sections, then you can wade fish them pretty well. So
So out where I'm at, that happens on a daily deal. Guys are launching them by themselves at them, and then strapping them up and dropping them off 100 or 200 foot bank with drift boats. So out here we use a lot of aluminum boats and then also fiberglass boats. I know the fiberglass companies out here, they'll come back in and resheet them or coat them on the bottom, but they're pretty hardy boats. So one of their taglines is "Fear no rock."
Yeah.
And I've seen them do some stuff that's pretty sketchy. We've done it. I've done it in Alaska too, or silt banks and gravel areas, or we've even dropped them off and snow machined in, and dragging them behind a snow machine. And the boats are stronger. The one Brent's talking about, I just haven't had an experience with.
Right,
so
right.
that was always my question. It's being that it's mostly wood, right, on the outside, or no wood?
No, it's no wood on the outside. It's all plastic.
Yeah. I thought it had some wood involved too. So it's coated,
I think the wood you're talking about is on the inside, because you can there's like 2 levels of that boat. They have one that has a bunch of wooden furniture that's just inside, like the seats and some of the rod holders. And isn't that right, Brent? It almost looks like a cabinet that they have. That's like super cool.
Yeah, the frame is all wood inside the plastic, and then it's like a plastic sheeting around the outside and on the bottom. Yeah, I think you could drag it as far as you like. I just don't know if it's too heavy for one person to drag. So maybe we'll have to go test that out.
Maybe.
Yeah, ours are straight down, right? So once they hit the bottom, it's in water. So guys have them tied up. They have shackles. They have pulley systems. They have all that.
There's no dragging. It's just controlling how fast it is getting away from you down this hill.
Yeah, I've done that before. It shoots out, and then you're like, well, this is not a good day.
Yeah.
So
got it.
Yeah.
Well,
Adam, why don't you tell us about your boat choice?
I am glad that you went in the middle, because the people are going to get the raft answer again from me. I grew up in the Southeast, and I used to guide in the Southeast, and their kayaks and canoes are extremely popular. Very, very popular. Everybody's got one. Everybody goes kayaking, canoeing, whatever. So there's a lot of areas that you could access the rivers with a canoe or a kayak. 2 guys easily picking it up, carrying it, through some trees, off the side of the road, whatever. I mean, you can launch a kayak or a canoe dang near anywhere, right? And I tried the whole kayak thing a long time ago, right when those like the gear fishing kayaks kind of got somewhat big, I was like, I wonder if that could work for me. Tried those, and that just did not work. I'm a big dude. I could not stand on the thing to save my life on a river. It would work on a lake. I could stand up in still water. That was fine. But on a river and like trying to go down, and you're focusing over here trying to cast, and you hit a stick or something in the water, and then there goes you and everything else that you brought with you. Anyway,
how many times did you swim?
Yeah. First day.
No comment. You can count it on one hand how many times I on the trial run. But anyways, I was pretty upset. They have people rig up anchor systems for their kayaks and canoes. In my opinion, they all suck comparatively to what we're used to on a boat or a raft. Having the pulley system where you actually reel it up, stick it in a clamp or a lock, you cannot beat that as far as fishing, guiding, fishing by yourself, or even fishing with your buddy. I mean, you just cannot beat having an actual anchor system for the ability to really target fish. And canoes and kayaks just do not have that availability that some of these other boats do. Where I really decided, as I said a second ago, to do the raft over the drift boat was, there were some areas that I knew that were at least wide enough that I could get it in. But, number one is, I fished by myself some, and I also guided some where I had to be whatever I had to do was going to have to be done by myself. I mean, if I had an 80-year-old client, I couldn't be like, hey man, just grab the front of this drift boat. Let's, hike down this hill. Is like enough for some of my folks. Like, all right, man, like I just need you to deal with yourself getting just you down this little hill. And, so whatever I had to be able to do by myself. And there's a lot of places in our rivers too, that it would be very difficult, in my opinion, to have a drift boat. What Brent's saying, as far as getting it through places, it wouldn't be an issue. Once you were on the water, a drift boat beats a raft. It's comfy. You can have all your stuff. It's got the locking storage. You can bring an entire fly shop with you in a drift boat. Versus, you've been in my raft with me, and I'm like setting boat boxes and waterproof bags and all sorts of stuff every time in and out of the boat, which is a pain. Once I'm on the water, a drift boat, I mean, I just don't know if you can beat it. But those rafts I'm honestly always pretty surprised at how strong those rafts are, being able to go up and, pull through stuff that we do, hook it up to the front of your truck and tow it up a hill. And being able, and in the Southeast, a lot of these rivers, people don't float a ton. It's not, it's not something that there's like a guide parade on every day. There's a lot of times that you may go 2 or 3 weeks, and the last person who floated it was probably you. And there are trees down across the rivers. So, I mean, I guess if you had a drift boat, and especially if you were in a drift boat either by yourself or with an 80-year-old client, I have no idea how you get around that. I mean, you'd have to pick a drift boat up onto rocks. I mean, up on the sides of a bank or potentially over a tree in the water, which is what we have to do with our raft.
We have a lot of trees out here, and I know after high water mark, most the guys that are going right after the high or on the drop, they're taking chainsaws. Do you guys need that out east with you guys?
Yeah. I normally don't bring a chainsaw. I normally figure out a way to get around the trees. I generally get around it quicker than I could cut it, at least the first time. And then if it was pretty bad, and it's a stretch that I run a lot, then I'll go in and
clean it up.
Yeah, go in and clean it up another day. But I mean, that'd be really
badass having a chainsaw.
Yeah,
in the fishing boat.
That would be cool. It also doubles as a fillet knife at the end of the day.
Where Brent's from, he has no trees, so he's not.
Yeah, he doesn't have that problem. If I lived in Colorado, Brent, I think my choice would probably be with you, if that's where I lived and where I normally fished. But man, I love to do a lot of water where, it's not something that you could just hop on Google Map or, your local fly fishing website that you use, or your local Trout Unlimited, whatever, and look at Blue Ribbon Waters, and all that stuff has nice boat ramps. Super easy with a drift boat. But
Yep.
I just know myself too. And I mean, how much is this drift boat that you're talking about, Brent? New, I guess. Aren't they 20?
Pretty expensive. 20? About 20 grand. I think you can build them up a little cheaper. They've got some options as far as the build on the inside, but yeah, I mean, you're not talking about a cheap boat,
right? Sorry.
No, and Adam can come out. Let's say he jumped in the bus and took off towards me. He could go hit the whole coast from BC all the way down to California with his boat. But if the water dropped, not that you couldn't. There's a lot of guys do it all the time with drift boats, but for me, like you guys said, 10 grand to 20 grand is a lot of money, and you're going to beat your boat up. I mean, you're just going to hit rocks the whole way down because all of a sudden the water tanks out on you, and it's just a boulder garden. So for me, back to the raft, I mean, I love drift boats. I honestly could have just wanted to be a drift boat, but where we fish, it's just, I like my boats to be nice and look nice, by the time we're done with it.
I mean, I think I've got 14 grand in my raft set up. So it's not as much on for me on that front, but at least I know myself, if I bought a $20,000 brand new drift boat, the only people that would row it would be like if I went and fish with Brent or you, any of the other guys that I fish with, and I fish with a lot of people from the Southeast, different places that just don't fish out of rafts a lot or drift boats at all. People that are really big into wading, whatever. And it would take a lot for me to trust to be like, hey man, hop in this $20,000 boat and we'll see what happens. Versus out of my raft, I'm pretty comfortable being like, hey, here's like a quick rowing 101. I know if you hit a rock, it's not as much to me. It's not as much the rocks just on the bottom. Like, oh, it's got shallow on us. It's like, you got a boulder field that you could crunch that, you could get hung up or crunch the side in on. As far as the safety aspect, I think going and fishing new water out of a raft is a little safer option.
Definitely. Adam, your drift boat or raft frame is, I think I would say it's the favorite raft frame I've ever fished out of. It was pretty comfortable. It didn't feel like you were going to lose stuff out of the bottom.
Yeah.
Was that just a stock frame, or have you messed with it and customized it?
So I've run through a lot of rafts with different frames, and the NRS ones are great because you can kind of customize and build out a lot of different things. But the one that I have now is kind of a hybrid between an NRS and there's this guy out in Missoula called Montana Raft Frames that builds frames specifically for these boats. Believe it or not, he aptly named his company. It's in Montana. He builds raft frames. He's got a pipe bender, so he uses the same gauge pipes that NRS does. So he does all this cool, unique stuff. He's a guide. He guides out on the Blackfoot a ton and a lot of the other rivers around there. And I mean, this guy has spent so many days in a boat guiding that he just freaking gets it. I mean, he just gets like a lot of the stuff you're talking about, Brent, like how, you're not worried about losing stuff. It fits really well. It's super comfortable to fish out of. And that is one of the biggest things that I like about my current boat is that frame, because it is like, it's dialed. And I ordered it. I actually had him do some custom built work for me that I wanted, because I wanted to also be able to have a motor that I could put on the back of my raft. And there's a lot of stuff in Alabama that we fish that, we fish the tributaries to these big lakes back home, which is really a big river that they dam up and to just turn into lakes. So we fish a lot of tributaries to that. And if there's not a takeout, a lot of times you'll have to motor through a lake to get to a boat ramp for actual like bass boats, like glitter boats are taken out here. Like people that, use GLoomis rods, but like, the other kind with the little push buttons and
this kind,
that kind.
Yeah.
Those you got to kind of rub shoulders with those guys. And they're like, what the hell are you doing in this balloon?
That guy's going 10 miles an hour. Our boat does 70.
Yeah, they'll laugh at you because I can't even do 10 on my boat. But anyways,
you putting in an electric trolling motor?
No, I run a 2.5 horse short shaft Suzuki.
Big dog.
Oh yeah, serious 4-stroke. So And you can carry a little 1 gallon gas. It has like a 0.7 gallon gas tank on it. So you just carry a little another 1 gallon gas tank with you and you can fill it up. And anyways, but I had, but I had my, my frame adjusted to be able to fit that motor perfectly so that I could still have the motor, still have the anchor, and still be able to actually operate it. So anyways, it's a perfect boat for what I do with it.
Sweet. But one more boat question, because I was recently introduced to jet boats. One thing I don't understand about jet boats is if you're going out for a full day of fishing anyway, why do you need to be able to run up the river, down the river, back up? Why do you need to be able to switch spots so quickly? Or is it just that you can reach further and then run back to the boat ramp at the end of the day?
This one's directed to me, correct?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, not at me.
Yeah. There's a bunch of reasons. The reason I'll give you a history of like mine. Where I grew up, Adam's boat is what we had. Out here, guys, there's a bunch of custom guys out here that are decking out rafts, and they have aluminum diamond plate floors, and they make them super rigid now. They're phenomenal. But like last year, we almost flipped a boat. Another guy had one because there was no flex. I mean, they're making them now, so they're basically a rubberized drift boat. In Alaska, we started with rafts, and then it was some drift boats. I mean, we're talking when I was moved up there, it was in '86. There was it was a single tip Avon type deal with a little tiny cheapy frame. Things have progressed. Well, where we were, it's a big body of water, lots of places to move, and fish are always consistently moving. I mean, we're talking big water stuff. And then you have lake portages like Adam's talking about where, yeah, the raft works great. But in a day when the bite might turn on in a certain spot or turn off and or pressure, when you're guiding like Adam did, myself or Brent, like I want to be away from people, or if I'm chasing wildlife or whatever. So there's a lot of reasons. The biggest one though was I could stay away or stay ahead of where everybody else was floating to. So if we all start at A and go to B, there's a mob. We've all seen it.
Right.
There's a mob and you're trying to jockey in that mob. And for me, I just normally hit the anchor and just wait it out and then just come through. With the sled, I could start at a new spot. I can go up to where they were an hour later and just fish the backwater behind them and just take my time and come back down. I could bounce around. If the fish are in Alaska, certain times of the year, it's a 70-something mile river that I was on. They're following the salmon, and once the salmon are gone, they're moving back up into the lake to winterize. So those fish are in transition spots, not just the typical feed lane. So there's some days you have it dialed, the three of us go out fishing, and I'm like, hey, boys, the last 2 weeks I've been hitting them in these 5 spots. We go to the spots, and all of a sudden that morning it's off. Well, now it's the drift boat. I mean, I can turn around and put a motor on and kick up, but with the sled, I can 30 miles upriver, 30 miles an hour downriver. I can go check out spots, find stuff. So it's more of the hopping game.
Yeah.
And getting away from people. I mean, that's the biggest thing for me was just getting away from people.
Yeah,
So,
the motor on the drift boat can't do that. It really just helps get you through some slack water or would allow you to go fish, the other side of a lake or something like that, more so than actually what you're talking about, like bumping around up and down rivers and things like that.
Yeah. And to be honest, like I had a 20 foot Willie drift boat with a 72-inch bottom with a 9.9 on it, and we can go upriver, but it's a slow process. But the biggest one was once we transitioned from, I was the second or third trout guide on my section that actually moved over to the powerboat. And it was a buddy of mine that kind of got us into it. The hookup and land ratio of large fish, if you're in a zone where you luckily have some trophies, like I was lucky enough to grow up in, the land ratio of those bigger fish was dramatically more with the sled because I could get on top of them, chase them around. If they take off on a 7-weight and you're in your backing and running, there's only so much power you can do in your body to keep up with that fish. And then if he turns and goes back upriver, well, by the time you get the motor going, it's over.
Yep.
So the sled helped with that. And that's what you see out here, Brent, when you came. It's guys are chasing salmon, they're chasing steel, they're chasing bigger anadromous fish, and they're running and gunning and following those fish when they move in pods. And then once they hook a fish, they can pull it out of the traffic and then chase it downriver or chase it back upriver. And, if a guy was lucky enough to hook in Alaska, you can sometimes hook a 60, 70, 80-pound king. it's a battle. And yeah, we could do it in a drift boat. It's fun, but if you're consistently trying to land those,
Yeah,
the sled helps.
I can see that for sure.
Yeah,
I know and we're not going to go off into saltwater and skiffs and kind of stuff, but I know, I mean, the only time I've ever experienced that is having the ability to like turn the motor on. I mean, there's definitely been times in the saltwater that it's like, all right, well, we got to turn this boat on and kind of just idle a little bit after this thing and sitting up there just trying to keep up with it as hard as you can on the reel. So, yeah.
That's
cool.
one boat. If I could live in the salt, I mean, I would love it. I would sell everything I have to go have a flats boat. I think that's the coolest boat out there. But in my line of work, I don't flats fish enough to have.
I don't know. I don't think very many people flats fish enough unless you live.
No.
Unless you live there, I know I couldn't.
Yeah.
Cool. Well,
that's the dream. All right. Well, it's official. The flats boat is the best fishing boat.
Yeah.
That's it.
I said it earlier. My final vote is going on the glitter boat for bass fishing.
0 to 80 in 2 seconds.
Baby.
Yep.
Yeah, 0 to 80 in 2 seconds.
Yep. My raft will not do 80.
Barely walking in the water.
Yeah, that's what you need.
2 wax jobs a week.
All right. I think that was pretty thorough. We got fully into the weeds there. Let's jump on to the second one. Are streamers really flies, or are they just fancy lures? Adam, why don't you start us off, because you may have some bias on this. Have you fished like flies that you tie that are streamers?
No, I've never done that.
Just beads and Euro nymphs.
Yeah, mostly Euro nymphs. I've done this. There's this new thing that's out called the squirmy worm. It's like a worm kind of material that you just tie to a hook. Works fantastic. There's no reason for streamers. I don't know. I'm going to be interested to see what y'all's take on this is, because mine is definitely pretty unorthodox. I don't necessarily think that there are flies and lures, but in my mind, it's just, do you throw it on a fly rod? Well, then you're fly fishing. Do you throw it on a spinning rod? Well, then you're conventional fishing or push button. I throw here we go. Here come the comments probably. I throw lures on my fly rods. I mean, I've fished plastic worms on fly rods. I've fished those topwater frogs on fly rods. I do not like frog flies. Nobody's made a frog fly that I like that's as good as that, like gamakatsu with the soft body with the the little tout thing, whatever. That's the best frog fly lure, whatever, that you can buy. I fish those on just heavy streamer rods, heavy saltwater rods.
So real quick on the tech tip, do you like bend those hooks up on those frogs just a little bit to get more bite?
Nope. I normally don't, because I fish a lot of weeds. So I want them like in the body. If I'm doing that, I want them like in the body.
But you're doing that for mostly bass.
That's all bass. Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I've thrown rubber worms to trout.
Yep.
On fly rods.
I may or may not have done the chatterbait thing on a fly rod.
Maybe or maybe not. I've maybe not watched you do it. So I'm gonna. I know this isn't exactly this guy's question, answering this guy's question, but I don't necessarily think, I don't know where the line between a fly and a lure sits. I mean, I guess if it's made of plastic, you could say it's a lure, but if you throw it on a fly rod, you're fly fishing. It's just a different kind of rod. It's not as much of a different kind of lure. You can throw anything on
a plastic bead would be a lure as well. Yeah,
sure. I can get behind that. You want to pin an egg? I mean, that could be a lure. A bead egg is not a fly. I don't think by this guy's standards either. But I mean, I guess that's kind of my answer. Is I don't necessarily think there's such things as really as much flies and lures. I think there's fly fishing and conventional tackle fishing, and that's somewhere. I mean, honestly, I think streamers are kind of somewhere in between, because it's pretty similar for how I fish a streamer. It's pretty similar to how you would fish a chatterbait on a spinning reel. You cast it out and reel it back in, and kind of try to target rocks and areas, or, up under trees, stuff like that. So not much of a difference to me.
Jake, where are you at on this?
We're all predators. So the guys that I follow and pay attention to and learn from the most fish both things, right? Like that's what makes us better. So I think the days of the elitists of we do this and we do this is ending, and it needs to end sooner than later because of we can get in the fish politics side of it, right? We're all anglers and we all need to come together to save the fisheries we all love. But yeah, the gear guys have things figured out that we then try to mimic on the fly side, right? So
Yep.
Same thing you guys are talking about. We're throwing little Dick Knight spoons, micro spoons on a spay rod and swinging it during a smolt migration on in Alaska and catching rainbows on it. It'll outfish any fly we can design or flash minnow or smolt pattern. So yeah, I consider myself as a predator. I consider you guys as predators. I'm going to fish with guys like-minded like myself. So when I do tie a fly, I typically am looking at something on a gear side of the world and saying, all right, how do I make it, swim like this, or how much flash do I need because this has flash, no flash. I've been speed fishing for a long time and we paint them. And I used to get in arguments with guys about saying it's not fair. It's not the same thing, but I put more hours into painting one single bead than I would tying a glow bug or any other egg pattern out there. So there's more of a craft to it than guys give it. So yeah, no, it's a form of gear fishing or just fishing in general,
Yeah. I like that mindset and that take a lot more than, there's fly fishermen and then there's these guys who are doing this thing and we're different. And yeah,
I mean, look, we got rattles in them now. That came from the gear side.
Yeah.
We never had rattles when I was a kid or you guys were kids. Now we have rattles. So that's the gear game. We got joints or articulation in our lures to make it do certain, things. And we want it to pause. I mean, we're designing rods at our factory specifically to throw these, game changer type flies and these other flies that are glide baits.
Yeah.
Basically.
And I've seen those new like rubber tail things too, that you can like put on the back of streamers that look, I mean, it's the exact same thing that's on the back of those like rubber lizard, or rubber worms with the tail that, kind of goes like this. And yeah, I mean, you're right.
I'll say this too. Like, I started center penning in 06, and Brent knows I talk about this a lot, but when I started, everyone made fun of it. It's like, oh, it's a gear rod, you can't fish it. Well, it's one of the oldest forms of fishing. There's zero drag, blah, blah, blah. Now you fast forward to 2021, we got Euro rod. Euro fishing is getting more and more explosive, and everyone's trying to do it. Well, we got a mono on a fly rod. It's the same thing, right?
Yep.
Like, come on. And then we use an indicator, but it's a float fishing in the gear world. So in my eyes, I don't put us in a box. I think like if a guy showed up at the bar and was sitting next to us and it was a bass guy talking with the gear rods, I'm going to pick his brain about everything I possibly can because he's got more experience in it than I do. So
I think
stay open-minded.
A ton from the gear guys.
Yeah.
I bet they know more about their fish than we know about our fish.
Well, if you look at
if
you look at all the old guys that aren't around anymore that were the saltwater captains or on they're getting up there in age. Most of those guys are, when they're not on TV as, fly fish in the East, they're throwing gear rods. So it's just, I think it's out there now.
Yeah. Jake, you kind of said, definitely something I agree with. The people that I know that are the best fishermen are not fly fishermen. They fly fish, but a lot of times they use gear stuff to either find fish, learn about fish throughout the year. They're gear fishing, kind of learning where the fish are at, what they're doing, what they're eating, whatever, using gear for that. And then when stuff's good, they'll switch over to the fly rod, catch some fish on the flies, and then just kind of keep moving.
No, and that should be our thing. We should have a quiver of rods and any rods, right? And we just literally have them in there as tools. And when we need that tool, I mean, we say it at Loomis all the time is, we're building tools for specific fisheries and specific actions or flies. Well, that's all this is. If it takes a bait caster to get to a spot, I'll pull off a bait caster. Like I think that, like you said, it's the guys that I really look up to can grab any rod on the table and make it go.
Yep.
And those are the guys I'm like, that's my buddy. Like, I want to talk to that guy, and I try to pride myself on, you can throw any rod at me right now and I'm going to be able to work it, versus the guys that are pigeonholed in, I only spin fish, only bait caster, only fly fish, and that, to me, that's a newer angler or an angler that's already gone full circle and just said, this is the only way I like to do it now.
My biggest problem with bait casting is it's hard for me to throw those squirmy worms. And like a purple haze or like a parachute Adams. I can't throw it on that gear rod. Do we have
those water floats?
Yeah. You got to do the little bobber with the water in it.
Clear floats. Yeah.
So I got two comments on this. Number one, I think the biggest separation between like the gear guy and the fly guy is ethics or what people think their ethics are. Like, generally speaking, you would think gear guys are going to keep fish and not release them. And generally speaking, you think fly guys are going to release all their fish. There's a lot of gear guys that release fish, but they just get thrown into the gear guy. Oh, he kills fish. So that's one thing I think that creates a bit of this separation, is just the perception that gear guys kill fish and the fly guys don't like that, generally speaking. Number two, I kind of forgot already, but I guess the next point I want to talk about is when a lot of the newer flies, I think Jake already mentioned this, we're designing flies to do the same thing that jerk baits, glide baits, whatever do. Like, the fly fishiest of fly fishing guys are taking inspiration from the gear side and really just trying to copy that with some modifications. So I don't think the separation is as big as most people put it out to be. But, here's the other thing. No matter how many fish I catch on gear rods or fly rods, I still feel more satisfaction from making that tight cast on the fly rod and catching the fish on the fly rod than I do on gear. You can learn a lot on the gear stuff. Go ahead.
Well, I think it keeps you busy. That's why I did it as a kid, right? I can't sit still on a fly rod. You're always learning. You're always having to do something to make it go, where, a lot of the gear style to cast is a lot less energy involved, which is great as you get older or you got an injury or something. But like, if you're in it and you want to actually be embedded in the whole process throughout the whole day, fly fishing gives you that, which is the thing that I think all of us got into it, right? From going home and tying a fly versus just going to the store and buying a lure. So, I mean, I think if we could sit there and pour molds and make our own, frogs, then we'd probably do that too, So
I definitely think that's one of the biggest draws to fly fishing for me anyways, was the ability to make my own stuff. And, I mean, I know there's guys, and I know some guys that, do like the plastic molding, and they'll custom, in clay and stuff, design a lure and then pour the plastic mold into it with the different colors. And, but I don't do that, but I can tie flies, I guess. Not that I can't, but I guess there is something cool about, like having a more than what a fly shop carries of fly stuff next to me here. The ability to sit down and like, I can make something myself. Like, I could have an idea and then I can make it, versus I don't know very many guys that make fishing lures. They mostly just go buy them at, the local tackle shop or whatever.
Yeah.
It's more I got a funny story for you guys if we got a sec. So if I was only a gear guy and I was out on this fly out trip guiding some guys, I would have been hosed if I didn't have the skills Adam just talked about tying flies. So we were out on a river, it's about 76-mile float. The week before, the float plane had left one bag of mine, and it was my tying stuff, right? So I lost all my gear, and I'm out west, and there's no tying gear. Well, I had the base essentials at the lodge, so I kind of scrambled them in a pack and went out. Well, silver salmon like to hit the top water, so Adam will love it because it's it's like your closest thing to frog fishing, right? So we're up there chasing those, and these guys were like spun up on it. We just want to catch them on the surface, and we were catching them subsurface and stripping big streamers and doing all that, catching trout. It was fun, but these guys really wanted to catch them on the top. I didn't have deer hair to spin up. I didn't have anything to make that. I had some hackle and in the right color choices and some flash. That's all I had, to make a subsurface fly. And about 3 or 4 days into this trip of like a 7 to 10 day float, one of the guys is reaching in his pocket to grab a napkin or something and dropped a pink earplug from the float plane, and it's floating on the surface. And this is no lie. I'm like, grab that. He grabs it. I go running over there. He's like, what the hell? And he's like, I'm sorry, I threw it in the water. I'm like, that's not it. Give them to me. So then I got all the clients. I go, give me your dirty headphones. So their earplugs. They're handing them to me, and I literally reversed them so they're bell shaped.
Yep.
Tied some hackle out the back, spun it around to kind of finish it off, and some flash. And it was a bunch of European English guys, and it was funny because I was like, here. And they're like, hell no, I'm not casting that. That's not proper. I'm like, cast it. First cast, I grabbed the rod, tied on. First cast, it's chugging just like we're used to. Silver. Eats it. And they're like, all right. So the next trip, I'm on the sat phone calling the plane company. Like, I'll buy a box. I don't care what it costs. I paid way too much money for this box. I still have them in the garage. But I ended up buying a box because it was easier to get the foam earplugs than it was to try and find deer hair and have it shipped all the way out to me, right? I just had the guy showed up with the bush plane again and was like, here's a box, kid. I don't know what you're doing with these.
You got a lot of ears, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, that gives you that tool. You know, that fly fishing gave me that tool. If I was, like I said, throwing some kind of hard plastic bait on the surface, I can't get back to town to buy more.
Yeah.
So,
I think the guys that do gear fish miss out that they, you know, on that whole side of like catching something on something that you made and designing a lure that you use to catch something. But that's a great story. I love that. Oh, Brent, you're muted or something.
Have you walked into a hardcore tackle shop and sorry about that, and tried to pick through the plastic worms? I mean, some of these have 10,000 choices.
Right.
I mean, I can't do it.
I mean, you're not going to come up with something, I guess, that somebody doesn't already come out with, like, or whatever.
Right.
No.
But I mean, that might be their creative process is like, okay, well, I got 10,000 choices.
Yeah.
And I picked the 2 or 3 that actually worked. So
it's
a little different.
That's true. Maybe that's a little different. It's kind of satisfaction that you could get out of that. Like I went to Bass Pro Shops and out of the 400 racks of plastics, I've found one that worked.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Well, I think we got time for one more topic here that we got on the docket. Did we receive this question?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
so
this is,
great. Well, another viewer received questions. We definitely appreciate that. Where do fish sit throughout the year? Which I guess they just want us to talk about that because that's not a question. But then they just say lots of folks that they know fish the same thing 24/7 all year round. I guess I don't know if he exactly means flies.
What do you mean by same thing? I think he means the same structure in the river, like the same seams all year long.
It could
Let's
be.
Just go with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the topic.
Yeah. Well, Jake, I think do you want to start us off? Because yours might be quite a bit different because you have salmon steelhead moving through the river.
Yeah, migratory fish.
Yeah, we got that, and our winter set in just like everywhere. But yeah, I mean, where I was at, in Alaska, things lock up with snow, so you're fishing more of the outlets or the inlets of the lake, But yeah, no, winter months, cold water times, fish slower, deeper water. Those fish don't want to expel the energy. Food sources are hard for them to get, calories in their bodies. And then as it progresses throughout the year and it gets warmer without the food source, let's just leave that out for right now. They typically will get into shallower, faster runs with more oxygen. So that would be your hottest, warmest days of the summer. In between all that, there's some places as transition zones, like I brought up earlier, and that just mostly is either shading, protection from predators, and or food source. If there's a bug crawling to the bank, he's going to slide over there and take off those meals. So there's transition zones in that, and that back to our original conversation with the sled was, on big water. That's why it's nice to have, that option to move around and try and find them in those shoulder times, let's call it.
Sure.
But yeah, winter, colder months or a really cold day, they'll slow down. If it's just a hot day and next thing you know, storm front comes in, they're not going to be as aggressive. So I typically start in a little slower water where they're looking for an easy meal and your presentation should slow down, versus something, ripping by them 100 miles an hour. They're not going to chase it as much.
It can be less fun anyways, I think, because you really do. You have to sit there and stare at that bobber like it's going super, like glacially slow. You almost feel like sometimes you're fishing a lake. Like you're just staring at that bobber, just barely moving down the current on some of the spots that.
And those are the ones you want to
spots.
fish with a buddy, because if you're looking at scenery or an eagle or a bear or just talking, drinking a beer, your buddies typically want to help you out with the hook set. He's yelling at you, "Your bobber's down, bobber's down."
Bobber's down.
So, Yeah, you better have a buddy.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
days.
I would need one because it is so boring. It can be. I think a lot of people probably just get really keyed in on like, well, this is working for me and it works, for a couple months. And then all of a sudden you get that, switch. It's like, oh man, what's going on? Where are the fish? All of a sudden I'm not catching anything. It's now cold. What just happened? I think it hits a lot of people that have a lot of trouble with that, because we get a lot of questions about it anyways.
Yeah, I think the cause of that is just, as a newer angler, they don't have all the different techniques, and they have one thing that they caught a fish on one time, and they're like, oh, okay, so I caught fish that way, I'm going to keep doing that.
Yeah.
And then they get reinforcement because they fish the same time of year.
Keeps working.
Habitual. And so they're like, oh, well, this has always worked for me. It's like, oh, well, the fish just weren't biting today. It's like, no, the fish were probably in a different spot in the river.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll even notice it on really sunny days, at least where I'm fishing. Really sunny, high sun days, the fish, even if it's warm out, they're not going to be as shallow. They're going to be deeper or in the shade. And you'll notice as the clouds roll in the afternoon, the fish will slide up into the shallower.
They push up. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. They're moving throughout the day. So you kind of got to read the river throughout the whole day, not only just season to season.
Yep. And I think a big trick that a lot of guys don't do anymore. I mean, when we were growing up, every old timer I know had a journal.
Yep.
And for me, a journal, when you start out, at least for your first few years on a new body of water, I would keep a journal, barometric pressure, what the water was doing, what the time of year was, what you caught them on, and then look at that, and you can use that as a starting guide. But as soon as you find out it's not working, check that off and write it down in the journal again. Ask somebody if they tell you something else, write it in the journal. I mean, I'm not in my heyday anymore and I don't get to fish as much, but yeah, that journal helps you get to where you want to be quick.
That honestly,
you don't have to try to remember.
Yeah. That honestly is probably the best tip that has ever been said on this podcast, is if you want to become a better fisherman, keep a journal.
Yeah.
Yep.
It helps. I mean, you can look at your phone nowadays and look at, you can look at your phone and kind of remember, but yeah, having a journal.
Right.
I mean, or if I'm talking to Adam and I'm thinking about planning a trip out east and he's telling me, and I can take notes of what he was doing then, and then I'll schedule it for the next year. Hey, about this time of year, he was doing this. I'll just take mental notes as I'm talking to buddies, or someone I know.
And the biggest thing for it too is the CFS. That's a big one for me, especially, guys that fish tailwaters, whatever. Maybe you fish, even if you're fishing freestones and you fish somewhere that actually gets rained on, like where I live in Salt Lake, but, recording the CFS, being like, oh, all right, well, I fished last week and it was at this CFS. Let's see what it's at today before I go fish, and learning those CFS, because you can't learn a CFS number. It's not, the chart changes for every single river that you want to go to. Because CFS here might mean it's super high and muddy, where that on that same CFS somewhere else means it's super low and clear. So that to me is the biggest one that you could learn a lot from by keeping a journal.
Yep.
Yeah, and one point on that, if you're going to a new river and it's your first time there, look at the USGS chart and see if the flows are ramping up or if they're falling down or what's happening, because that can tell you a lot about fish behavior.
Like Adam said, there's a river I fish up north. It's 9,000 is a normal day, but you go anywhere else around my house normally right now, that's full on flood stage.
Right.
So knowing what a flood stage is, looking at the average per year, and you can kind of see, and then you're in the ballpark to go out there and spend the time, and then also where you'd look for fish.
Right.
So
I think the saltwater guys are a lot better at this next point that I've got, but finding the food, you'll find fish. So, I know that's obviously, I think that's like the number one thing for saltwater fishing, is if you can figure out where food is, you're going to find fish. With trout rivers, I think we kind of miss that, because you see, the water's moving, the food is kind of moving past you. Sometimes it can be difficult, but in the wintertime, if there's like less food in this run that you're fishing, maybe there's not a big hatch, maybe there's not bugs coming off, and like Jake said, maybe there's not those bugs that are crawling out off the bottom of the river and kind of sliding up over to the banks, whatever. The fish may not like to be there. I'm not saying, I mean, they do like to be in runs, or I'm not saying that, but like being able to find out what those fish are feeding on, I guess, and to pause right there, how do you guys ethically feel about the little squeezers and, kind of figuring out what a fish is eating if you catch one on like a slow day, pumping its stomach? Where do you guys land on that?
You want me to go first, Brent?
Mm-hmm.
I've never used one on a river that I can remember, maybe once. I use them on lakes though, because the lake to me, because it's like you said, it's not moving water. It's harder to read. There's
True.
shelves or ledges, or if they're suspended or not, chronometers are coming, if it's calabatus or whatever, right? Damsels. So for me, I've used it, but I don't like using it on a really active fish. If that fish is bouncing around in the net and bouncing around my hand, I won't even try because I don't want to hurt them.
Right.
That's just me personally. There's no proven fact that once the pump's in his stomach that it's not really hurting him, but I try to find a docile fish to do it too.
I'll second that thought, Jake, is like, I don't like doing it on rivers. And the main reason is because if you caught a fish on the river, it's probably not a fluke. So like figure out what you did right and what they ate and keep running with that. But the other part is you can seine the river and see what bugs are there way easier than you can in a lake. And I think most of us don't understand lakes nearly as much as we do rivers. So having that little extra leg up or that little extra piece of information from pumping a fish on a lake it's kind of needed to get onto the same level.
Sure.
But I'm not the best lake fisherman, so maybe I just am not far along enough on that journey.
Yeah. I'm pretty much with you guys right there. I mean, I don't if you know how to pump a fish's stomach, it's not unethical. I think the unethical part could be if you've never had someone show you, if you've never had someone figure out, here is how you can ethically pump a fish's stomach. But what Jake said is also true. You got to find the right fish, I think. Because if you get that thing down in there and that fish freaks out all of a sudden in the net, that, then yes, that could be bad. But, I mean, there's biology teams out there freaking doing this day in and day out across the entire country, pumping fish's stomachs. And, I wouldn't look down on someone, I guess, if they did it, as long as they actually knew how to do it. Learn from someone, learn from the fishery department, learn from someone who knew how to pump a fish's stomach safely. But I think that's it. I think if you can find if you can find food, you will find fish. Whatever that is. And potentially too in the winter, that might be streamers. Maybe maybe you're used to nymphing this run and we're going to have to change. It's not just change flies or where you're at. You may have to change your technique totally.
Yeah. And I think too, why we don't do it in the rivers as much as the food source is larger.
Yep.
Alaska or to Montana or whatever, you can't suck out a sculpin out of a fish's mouth or a stomach, right? It's pretty hard to do versus small flies. We're in a lake. It's they'll get on some sticklebacks occasionally here and there, but most of the time we can get it in the tube.
Sure. That's right.
If he's feeding. So, but
good point. Well,
do we need to cover any more on seasonality or anything? Or are you good?
Well, I mean, we've kind of covered the thought process of, okay, well, this isn't working. I guess I should move to a new spot in the river or a new technique.
Yeah.
Which should cover the part about people are fishing the same thing all year. Like, I don't think we don't even know that well, on the third month of every year, the fish are going to be sitting in this. It's too variable based on weather conditions. So I don't think we need to dive into super specific where the fish are going to be, because they'll be at one point during the year, they'll be in almost every spot of the river.
The only other thing I would add, because it was deep in my career that this was brought up to me, and I was doing it naturally but didn't understand why, and I think Brent knows where I'm going. If he doesn't, he'll hear it and he'll know. But I would chase fish on streamers, and I was literally going off of where the sun was, but didn't know I was going off of where the sun was. It was timing for me. I'd be like, hey, I got to be here at 6 o'clock tonight because the last 4 days it's been on. What was brought to me once I started working with the group we're in now, and it was Tom Larimer, because of his steelhead background and the river he fishes, it's the way the sun is. You know, if they got a sun in their eyes, they're not going to chase something down. They'll lose it. So
Yep.
I didn't know I was naturally doing it, but once he said it that way, I was like, oh, that's what I've been doing the last 10, 15 years, was chasing the sun. So I would tell guys, like, if you're throwing bigger stuff where a fish has to chase it down, or even see it as it's coming fly from dry flies, or maybe a wet soft tackle type stuff, pay attention where the sun's at. If it's in the fish's eyes, you're going to have a less chance of catching that fish if he's looking right at it, tracking down, an object. So get to where the sun helps and benefits you, or the cloud cover, or whatever else you can do.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Because I think a lot of people, like alluding to what Brent said, they get in the habit. They probably go down to the river through the summer. They're pretty new, figuring it out. They spend the time sitting on the bank, maybe trying to figure out what's happening. All of a sudden it clicks and they're like, oh, dang, they're eating pheasant tails or squirmy worms in this run. Great. I'm going to go fish the runs with squirmy worms. And then when it quits happening, they don't ever go back to the drawing board and say, all right, hold up. Let me have another seat. Let me sit down on the bank and let me actually think this through. All right. If they're not there, where are they? What am I seeing? What bugs are there? Flipping over rocks? All that kind of stuff. I think people do not stop what they're doing and go back to the drawing board very often. Or if you ask them, one of the biggest tips that I ever got for fly fishing is every 5-10 minutes, if you're not just, catching fish, ask yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing? And if you can't answer it, then you need to figure out how to answer it. So, if it's like, okay, well, I'm fishing this fly because I know that this bug is here. I know that it's at this level, and I know that it should be occurring right here, and fish should be eating it. Or whatever the answer is. But definitely asking yourself, if you're not catching fish, why are you doing what you're doing? And if the answer is, well, worked in June, well, that's not the right answer.
I think that might also be a confidence thing. Like I remember for years as a newer angler, I would go out there with a hot tip from the fly shop and just beat the same type of thing over and over and over, because I was convinced I wasn't fishing it right. Like, I didn't know for sure if my flies were getting in the zone. I didn't know if I was fishing a size 18. I didn't know if it needed to be a size 20 or whatever. So it was a confidence thing for me.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know for sure that I was fishing it correct.
Right.
So
for you,
have a little more confidence
for you, even if it was
yourself.
a 20, it was probably too big.
Yeah. I mean, it should have been fishing 32.
Should have done 30s.
Yep.
I think the other thing too is if once you get that logbook going and you kind of have that confidence of what should work, switching every 5 minutes sometimes will get you caught in the wrong way too, right? Like, fish just might not feed. I mean, I've seen it down in the States, and I've seen it specifically in Alaska where salmon are spawning. They don't spawn throughout the whole day. If there's a pair spawning, they're only going to spawn during a section. And in a cloudy water or glacier silt water where you can't read that, guys will go in there and just start changing. And it's like, man, they're just not on. And that happens down with bugs too. So the fish are there. They're just in a glut right now, or they just don't want to feed right now, and you just have to sit it out.
That happens.
But if you start changing that, you might get back out of that pattern. And then the next thing you know, you're chasing that all day long and not catching anything because you just switched too soon.
Sure. Well, that's a great point. Well, guys, I think we got off in the weeds.
My favorite time of the day.
It is. I think we got off in the weeds, which is which I guess was also kind of the plan, which is why we only wanted to pick 3 of these listener questions. Thanks so much for everyone who submitted a question. We got quite a few that we either just couldn't go into or for ethical reasons, or also we just couldn't do it on a podcast. Thank you so much for everyone who did submit a question. We really do appreciate y'all's engagement. And even if we didn't go over your question this week, please keep sending them in, because if nothing else, it gave us some ideas for what you guys are looking for, what you are wanting to see, and it'll probably come up in another episode. So thank you so much. If you liked this episode, make sure that you subscribe to our podcast, Blue Line Co. on YouTube, and this is a RamblinFly playlist off of the Blue Line Co. YouTube page. Make sure you follow the RamblinFly podcast on Instagram at RamblinFly. Look below in the comments for some of the links that we'll have for some of Jake's stuff, some of these boats that we talked about, some of the things we talked about in the episode. There will be links here. If you are watching this on or listening to this on Spotify or potentially Apple, if Tim will ever call us back, he may not. Anyways, if you are listening to it, if you do hop over on the YouTube, there's you can see some of this stuff as well and check out the comments. Jake, thanks so much for joining us. We'd love to have you back.
Thank you, guys.
And
you guys are forgetting my
Oh,
favorite part of the
oh
day.
my gosh, I skedaddled right through it. Brent,
I mean,
because
that was clean.
They better be good.
I know. I started. I was really on a roll, but yeah, don't leave just yet because Brent has the best part of the RamblinFly podcast. He's got our funny of the week, or
That we forgot last week,
and we did forget it last. Is it funny, Brent, or is it?
It's funny.
Okay.
Oh, this one's funny. Can you guys see the screen?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
All right. Well, we are inbound.
I know the seat.
Ever notice how you come across somebody once in a while that you shouldn't have fucked with? That's me.
Kelly Gallup is the keeper
Gallup.
of the river.
Is that the second Kelly Gallup since you guys started this? I think so, right?
Yep.
Yes.
You need just a Gallup section on
You
the
need Gallup and Russ Miller. That's all you need. Just
Yeah.
those two guys.
So apparently we figured out that Brent has a crush on Gallup.
Yep.
That's two in a
Okay,
row.
this is
Two in a row of the
guy.
funnies were about Gallup.
Yeah.
I just thought that was too good because he was holding the
That's-
bucktail,
Yeah,
calling it beautiful last week.
that's so good. Well,
All right.
thank you for that too,
Well,
Brent.
thanks, Jake, for coming on. Appreciate
Thank you, guys.
the insights.
Best of luck and hope you guys have a great holiday season with the family.
Yep.
Appreciate it. You too.
Thank you, guys.
Right on. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. We will see you guys next week. See you, Adam.
Bye.